Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back to my channel today. I'm Kevin, and today we're back to our Second World War topic. Today we will talk about aircraft carrier. So these are the ships that just like the battleships, but are much more powerful. They have the missions to carry aircraft and planes to fight on the airfield. These are very important during the Second World War since they provide a lot of advantage and help the militaries to take information or even make ambush for the enemy on the front line. So, for 100 years, the heavily armored battleships were the most powerful things that the armies can use on the sea. And all the major fighting nations in the world need to have their fleets. But now there was a new arrival in the Navy arsenal. That is the aircraft carriers. They carrying up to 100 aircraft each. The carrier proved to be more than a match for even the mightiest battleships since they provide more power and also durability. The most powerful battleships ever built were two identical Japanese ships named Yamato and Musashi, designed in the late 1930s. These titans of the sea weigh 71,000 tons each, and they have the length of 263 meters, with a crew of 2,500. The Yamato was the flagship of the Japanese fleet, from which the commander-in-chief directed battle. It had three main gun turrets, each containing three guns with fire massive shells that have the width of 45 centimeters. It also carried another 24 smaller guns and 146 anti-aircraft guns to protect itself from the enemy aircraft carriers. Apart from the extraordinary firepower, the Yamato was shielded by a 40 centimeters protective layer of thick steel. Of course, in our imagination, we must think that 40 centimeters of thick steel must be a very small number since we already see how the bombs and let's say torpedoes work with explosion and also how they destroys the ships. But this is not to say or having said that these explosive weapons have the power more than the grenade we say nowadays. So the things that we see nowadays is just, let's say, normal weapons for individuals to use, and the torpedoes or aircraft bombers with their weapons is more powerful than that. So a 40 centimeter of steel must be, let's say, must look like not enough. But according to the reality, this these battleships, the Yamato and the Musashi, is very du durable, or you could say it's very hard to take down. I will tell you how that the ships was sank during the Second World War. So the Yamato fought at the battles of Midway and Leyte Gulf and was eventually destroyed in April 1945 on the way to defend the Japanese island of Okinawa. It is very hard to take down the ships since it took 11 torpedoes and 7 bombs to send this great monster into the bottom of the seas. Let's see the amount of weapons or bombs I just said is 11 torpedoes and 7 bombs, which means this is a huge amount of explosion. Now, let's take it on a normal battleships. In our movies, we see they are usually sank by just one or maximum, two, right? So the power of the Yamato is too much that they have the power to endure and take in the damage caused from 11 torpedoes and 7 bombs. And as I said, bombs at that time is destructive. They are not just how they are today with small generate. They are very huge bombs. We could see in our countries when people let's say, cutting out bombs, even though why did they do that? But it's caused a very dangerous explosion if they do something wrong. And therefore, we could see that that is just a small bumps. The thing we are talking about is way more bigger than that. Alright? So that's how the Yamato was sank into the sea during 1945. Significantly, these were delivered by a force of 179 aircraft, which means just to take down this single battleship, the Allied need more than, I mean, over two aircraft carriers since each of them carry over 100 of aircraft. And now we have the amount of over 200 aircraft, mean that we need like more than one carrier or at least two carrier. I'm not sure about the number. I guess one carrier could still solve the problem themselves. But yeah, I will say that for you guys too easy to imagine how hard this ship was to be taken down. And they are take these aircraft also being supported by nine American carriers. And now this is where the contrast appears. I just said that the amount of aircraft need to be provided could be at least like two aircraft carriers or maybe one. But the real number is nine aircraft carriers from the America. So the things that I thinking about here is that maybe the other seven aircraft carriers is just support by using torpedoes and using guns instead of sending the aircraft. I think so. Since each aircraft carriers have 100 aircraft, I don't think that nine aircraft carriers could just give out just like, let's see, two per nine of the power. All right. So that's my opinion. But maybe in reality, back then, an aircraft carrier carries, let's say, not as much as the information that I've learned about on internet and on books talked about. All right. So the aircraft carriers had first been built during the First World War actually. They are indeed a very important things that the scientists and engineer focus on them a lot. But it was only in this war, which means the Second World War, that they were brought into action. British and US carriers were used to protect the convoys from enemy submarines and warships. Aircraft from the British Ark Royal weakened the powerful German battleship Bismarck, which is not a carrier, and enabled the British to catch and sink it down to the sea. But it was the Pacific Sea where the aircraft carrier's power was proven most crucial. The attack on Pearl Harbor would have been inconceivable without them, as would the American campaign to encounter or to oust the Japanese from their Pacific conquest. In a single day, in July 1945, US carrier aircraft destroyed a battleship, three aircraft carriers, and a cruiser and 12 other ships from the enemies. Of course, that said, the Japanese aircraft is more quicker. You guys may think so, but it's not. It's just that the aircraft have a very big amount of, let's say, planes and aircraft. The aircraft carrier, sorry. So that aircraft carriers have a lot of planes, but instead, as I just said, in contrast, as I just said, they have a 40 centimeter length wall of steel, and that is not too much for more than 100 aircraft to destroy. So, in summary, the aircraft carriers provide a very good protection for themselves and also a very big powers. But these powers, compared to how their durability works, may be way more powerful that they could be easily destroyed. Does not mean that this aircraft durability alone was bad. All right. Typical of the US carriers used in the Pacific was the USS Essex, in which could carry up to 100 planes. There were 24 similar carriers built during the war because the aircraft carriers were so deadly. They were the principal target of enemy attack. And every time they get out to the sea, they have to be protected by the escort of battleship, cruisers, and also destroyers. Preparing an attack from carriers was an immensely complex mission, since they have to involve a crew of 3,500. Planes had to be filled with fuel, armed with machine gun bullets, bombs, and torpedoes, and taken from hangars inside the carriers and up to the flight deck. Heavy torpedoes bombers also being put at the stern of the ships, since they need to have the greatest length of deck to take them off. And for some of you guys who don't know what is a deck, which means that's the road for the planes to run in, and then when they have enough power and vector, they will turn their, let's say, the wings up a little bit, change the angles, and then they will take off. And that's what we call the deck, the road for planes to take off. All right. So that's all I want to talk to you guys today about the battles of the Titans, the aircraft carriers, and also how that they made their power proof during the Second World War by destroying the enemy's battleships and even other aircraft carriers. And that's all I want to talk to you guys today. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys in my next video. And now I think it's time for a second and see ya.